For the longest time, we thought we had it all figured out. We knew exactly what made us special, what drew that thick, clear line between humans and the rest of the animal kingdom. But then this young researcher, Jane Goodall, she goes into the forests of Gombe, and what she found, well, it didn't just teach us about chimps. It forced us to look in the mirror and completely rethink what it even means to be human. This quote, wow, it sent absolute shockwaves through the scientific world. This was the reaction from Jane Goodall's mentor, the legendary Dr. Louis Leakey, right after she told him what she'd seen. And his words just perfectly capture the seismic shift that was about to happen. And that's really the question at the heart of it all, isn't it? What do you do when the very definitions you've built your whole identity on just start to crumble? That's what we're going to get into here, how Jane Goodall's work did exactly that, one jaw-dropping discovery at a time. All right, so first up, let's tackle the big one, the bedrock idea that for centuries defined what it was to be human, our ability to make and use tools. The whole idea was super simple, right? Homo habilis, handyman. We were the tool makers, period. This was seen as this unbreachable wall between us and every other living thing on the planet. It was neat, it was tidy, and honestly, it was pretty comforting. And then this happened. Jane Goodall is sitting there watching a chimpanzee she'd named David Greybeard, and she sees him pick up a twig, very carefully strip all the leaves off it, and then stick it into a termite mound to fish them out. Think about that. He didn't just use a tool, he made one. And in that one moment, that whole wall came crashing down. But see, David Greybeard wasn't some kind of one-off chimp genius. No way. He was just the beginning. Goodall and other researchers started seeing an entire toolkit out there. Chimps were using branches as hammers, rocks as anvils. They were even chewing up leaves to make a little sponge to soak up drinking water. This wasn't a fluke, it was culture. But here's where it gets even wilder. Goodall's work went so far beyond just tools. She started to pull back the curtain on a social world that was so complex and at times so eerily familiar that it was both fascinating and, gotta say, deeply unsettling. So take this for example. The accepted wisdom was that chimps were peaceful vegetarians, but the reality Jane saw in Gombe, a totally different story. She found out that not only do they eat meat, they actively hunt for it. We're talking coordinated, strategic hunts for prey like monkeys. And researchers even saw that they often eat the brain first, probably for all its high-fat energy. At first, Jane Goodall actually thought chimps were, in her words, like humans but better, more peaceful. But the longer she stayed, the more she saw a much darker capability, something we had always reserved for the worst chapters of our own history. From 1974 to 1978, Goodall witnessed what you can only call a civil war. A community of chimps split up after a power struggle. And then the larger original group began this systematic 4-year campaign of violence. They conducted these brutal, coordinated raids until they had hunted down and killed every single male from the new splinter group. This wasn't just random aggression. It was organized, lethal violence. It was war. But and this is so important, just as she was uncovering this darkness, she was also documenting a profound capacity for the behaviors we cherish most in ourselves, things like kindness, love, and compassion. And you see this capacity for connection most clearly in the bond between a mother and her child. It's just incredibly strong. Baby chimps are completely dependent on their mothers for years, and they often stay close for their entire lives. Their social fabric is just so rich and complex. Goodall saw all these different parenting styles, just like in any human community. A mother's social standing and support could literally help her son rise to be the alpha male. And maybe most remarkable of all, she saw true altruism. She watched adult chimpanzees adopt orphaned youngsters, a level of compassion that, before then, we really thought was uniquely human. So, okay, after all of this, the tools, the hunting, the war, the compassion, where does that leave us? What really separates us now? Well, long after Goodall's first observations in the field, the geneticists in the lab confirmed what her work had suggested all along. And the number is just staggering. We share 98.6% of our DNA with chimpanzees. That makes them, without a doubt, our closest living relatives in the entire animal kingdom. So where does that leave us? I mean, the list of what we share is just profound. Tool use, complex social bonds, hunting, even warfare and compassion. So what's left in the different column? Well, the biggest thing seems to be our unique, sophisticated language. Chimps can't talk about the past or plan for a future they can't see. They can't teach about things that aren't physically there. That ability for abstract thought, powered by language, that seems to be the crucial distinction. And all of this brings us to this incredibly powerful final thought from Jane Goodall herself. Her life's work completely erased that sharp, comfortable line we'd drawn in the sand, and she replaced it with a blurry, complicated, and a much more interesting reality. And that leaves us with one final, profound question to think about. By showing us how much of ourselves we can see in chimpanzees, Jane Goodall's work doesn't just redefine them, it redefines us. And it forces us to ask, if that line is so blurry, then what is our responsibility to these beings who are so very, very much like us?